Hello and welcome. You're viewing the Citizens Journalist podcast, Mesa County Compass, that brings you the news that you can use from a different point of view. I'm Ruth.
I'm Lisa.
And together we are Mesa County Compass. Our goal is to create an informed, current, active citizenry armed with the facts. We will be covering what's new to you, what it means to you, what you can do about it, and provide you access to the decision makers when we can. Good afternoon. You're here with Mesa County Compass this afternoon, and we have Mr. Brent Goff here. He is our county assessor, and he will be giving us a little bit of an explanation about, and maybe a little bit more than just an explanation, but some good facts about what's going on with the taxes. People have been quite concerned about the raise in the property valuations. So Brett's here to discuss that with us. Welcome, Brett.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes.
I'm glad to be here.
Yes, we appreciate you so much.
Yeah.
And you were on last year, gave us great information. But, so let's go back and talk a little bit about who you are, what you did, and then what a county assessor does
Okay.
all day long.
I'm glad to be here. I'm Brent Goff. I'm your elected county assessor. I'm in my first term. And we have a term limits in Mesa County. So I'm up for another term if the voters will have me again. And but what the county assessor does is we make sure that there's a value on all 90,000 parcels in our county. And that value sets the basis for property tax, so it's very important to get that right. My piece of it is to, with my staff of 26 and a half, make sure that we do our very level best to make sure the values are accurate. And then from there, it gets kind of out of our hands. The assessment rates are set by your legislature, and that is Front Range dominated.
Right.
So the assessment rates are set by the folks in Denver and the governor. And then the third piece of that calculus is what we call a mill levy. And I brought a handy dandy mill levy booklet you can find on our website at assessor.mesacounty.us, and that shows all the mill levies that each government entity applies to that assessment rate. For instance, your property tax bill is always going to be having the lion's share go to the school district.
Right.
So typically 60% of your property tax goes to the school district. And then if you're in the city, are you in the city
Yes.
limits here? So there's a mill levy that the city of Grand Junction applies. They have 8 mills. If I remember right, Fruita has 17 mills, something like that.
Wow, that's quite a bit.
I could actually look it up and give you a definitive answer on that. We have the City of Fruita, I'm sorry, I misspoke. They're only 10.146 mills. Let's see what the town of Palisade is. The town of Palisade is 17.5 mills.
Wow.
So if you live in a area that has more government services, your mill levy is going to be higher. If you live out in Quebec, like say Bass Lakes Estates, your mill levy might be half of what it is downtown Grand Junction.
Okay.
But it's going to take longer for the fire department to show up.
True.
And you go to a different school district. And all those things we vote in. It's our fault. Us voters, by a majority rule, decide to establish a taxing district. We want a fire department. So they all vote. That gets on the tax roll. And then it becomes the mill levy that we all pay taxes on. So I always look in the mirror when people say taxes are too high. The majority of the people out there vote for that. and sometimes you're outnumbered. You want taxes to go down.
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage folks to show up at the budget hearings in the fall and talk to each entity. Show up at the podium and say, do you need 17 and a half mils? Do you need 8 mils? Can you lower it? Your value went up.
Right.
So there's a mechanism to offset if the market value that I send out goes up,
Mm-hmm.
and if the legislature decides not to do much with the assessment rate, our last best hope is our local taxing entities. They have the power of the pen to lower that mill levy.
Mm-hmm. And the county did that last year because, as I recall, property valuations went up 40%.
They did. They went up 39% countywide, and Mesa County government issued it was a check. We all got the checks in the mail.
We did.
In prior years, they just lowered the mill levy, and each government entity has an option to do that if they want to.
So, because I was going to ask, I know Mesa County has not debruced, and that the city of Grand Junction debruced. Does that have anything to do with that, or is that totally different?
It does and doesn't. They still can choose to lower the mill levy at the council level. They could convene, vote to lower the mill levy to offset that increase. And if enough people show up at the podium, that might affect some change.
That would be
Yeah.
good. So right now, how much? I know it's never assessed at 100% of what the property's valued. That there's a percentage. What is our percentage of property value that the state has determined?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that.
Oh, me
'cause,
too.
For the first time in history, our legislature decided to do what I call a bifurcated assessment rate. It really complicates things. They legislated a different assessment rate for the school district than they did all the other local governments.
Oh.
So in past, we were bound by Gallagher, if you guys remember the Gallagher Amendment.
And you might explain it for somebody that's 25 that doesn't
Sure.
remember anything.
So for 25 years, the way Gallagher worked is as the property values went up, the residential assessment rate ratcheted down to offset that. And in
That seems fair.
2020, the voters statewide decided to get rid of that formula and put that in the hands of the legislature. So instead of it being an automatic thing, it was something that the legislature would wrestle with. And their decision making this year, for the first time in history, messed with the assessment rate on residential property to the point where we have 2 different assessment rates to administer down at my office. One going to the school district that's a little higher at 7.15%, and one going to all other local governments. And that isn't even going to be determined until December. Because those assessment rates, I used to be able to tell you in January, here's your assessment rate for the year. Now, it's based on a statewide growth formula. If values go up more than 5% statewide, it triggers a lower assessment rate. If it goes down, if it's below 5% statewide, then it's a different amount.
So we are at the mercy of the eastern part of the state. Then.
I
The
think
legislature.
I think
Right.
your question is very, very good. If we're saying that we're outnumbered over here and our legislators are outnumbered, I would agree with you. The super majority in the legislature calls the ball on this kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So
Well, when we got rid of the Gallagher Amendment in 2020, do you think that people understood what they were getting
That was
rid
my
of?
next question. Good job.
I don't remember that Gallagher, because anytime they say that we're going to take that control out, it doesn't even make sense that people would vote for that.
Yeah.
How was it worded that it passed? I mean, what were they telling us that we were going to receive if we did that?
Right. That's a great question, and I'll just be blunt. I think that they're disingenuous. And here's why. The ballot language said, if I remember right, without raising taxes, shall the assessment rate change. I don't remember the exact language, but it started out without raising taxes. Now, the authors of that amendment knew full well we were facing down one of the biggest real estate bubbles in history in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
They knew this was looming out here. They weren't stupid.
Mm-hmm.
They knew these actual values statewide were bubbling.
Mm-hmm.
They were going up big time. And they knew that when they wrote that language that way.
Mm.
Well, and that's the first thing people see. That's the thing that sticks in your head.
So,
oh, we don't want any more taxes.
So it's complicated enough to where, remember, it's a 3-part formula. There's actual value, assessment rate, and mill levy.
Mm-hmm.
I think their language said without raising tax rates.
Oh.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They knew that the actual values are going up. They didn't mention a word about that.
Right.
So
So you're bringing in more money, even though it's like the idea of selling more volume.
Yeah.
That you're going to make more money.
Right. Exactly.
Somehow or another, it all fits in with the COVID thing too, because about that time we were starting in the throes of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
People were locking themselves in the house. They didn't pay attention to such things like they normally did.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that there's a mechanism where people can, when you see that sort of information and the way it's the language, it's too complicated to really go, what does this mean? Yeah. And there's no obligation at that point on them to have somebody explain it in a way that says, okay, this is what we're anticipating, and we do need people to come out and say, okay, this is what this language really means, and this is what the consequence of that will be if we have what we're seeing. Like if you had been able to come out and say, voters.
Sure. And to be fair, I want to give you the other side of the story.
Mm-hmm.
The authors were also worried about the spread between the commercial and the residential. And they were worried that the commercial folks under Gallagher were paying more and more while the houses were paying less. Well, there's two ways to fix that.
Mm-hmm.
The best way to fix that would be to lower the commercial rate.
Of course.
Right.
And then the problem would be solved that way. And they didn't want to do that.
That's too easy.
Right. That would have been my preferred way to handle it, is to have the same rate applied to everybody, and then everybody. Taxes are best administered when they're very shallow, but very wide.
Right.
So if everybody's paying in a little bit, everybody knows, hey, I don't like taxes, but at least the burden isn't all on me.
Right.
You know. So, but
everybody's got skin in the game.
Yeah.
So we can look at our services and see if they're worth it.
Yeah.
Is there a way to, when they say we've got 8 mills, to know what those 8 mills are going for?
I don't know exactly how you do that other than to get into their budget. And I'll tell you, the Mesa County budget office has the budget highlights and the budget online for people to see. You could ask for you're a taxpayer. You could go up to the podium and ask. You could go on the website and ask, and I think that they would need to give that to you.
The whole budget, or say this is because they act somehow like it's sacrosanct. We can't tell you. You wouldn't be able to understand it anyway. It's so complicated. And the school district has said that over the years, but it's true too. It is hard to understand.
And maybe I know our budget officer has made budget highlights, and then there's the actual budget with all the weeds, you know, and any kind of CORA request,
Right.
Colorado Open Records request, will probably get you what you need. Informally, I like to put as much information on the website as I can, and the budget that the county puts up, I think, is pretty good. So, but I forgot to mention, ladies, this is an important time of year for the taxpayers.
Right.
This is our protest season.
Right.
We're inviting taxpayers to come down and talk to us if they think their value's too high. And this is important, that my appraisers can take a more humane look at your property value. If you got a notice in the value, like your other 89,000 Mesa County residents, you should have gotten one in the mail May 1st.
Got it.
And it's a postcard. And on that postcard, it says notice of value. And it gives your property characteristics and your account number. I want you to look at that and ask yourself a question. Could I sell my property for the value that the assessor has on it? If the answer is, yeah, maybe I think it's a little low, or yeah, I think the value is good, I think the assessor office nailed it, you don't have to do anything. That will become the basis for your tax bill next January. But if the value's too high and you say, there's absolutely no way I could sell my house for that, I want you to file an appeal. The way to do that, there's a couple ways. Come on down to the courthouse. We'll have appraisers there ready to talk with you. Also, you can just go online, jump online and fill out the online form and submit it that way. The folks that want to appeal have until June 9th, which falls on a weekend. So we'll take appeals till the following Monday. But you have to file the appeal by then. And what we do then is we'll look at comparable sales in the neighborhood and take a more humane look at it. My appraisers are experts in their area of town, and they can actually take a closer look and see if we need to adjust that value or deny it.
And it doesn't hurt you to go and say, I want you to look at that. It's not
gonna
like
cost
you're
anything.
It's not like they're gonna say, okay, now that you were wrong, we're gonna charge you more.
Well, let's talk about that. I think that there are county assessors, believe it or not. I'm not going to call them out by name, but there are some that will use that as an opportunity to correct the value statutorily and raise it. Because the statute says the assessor will correct the value. And some of my colleagues who don't think the same way I do will take a taxpayer that comes in and correct the value and say, okay, I really think it's worth $450 instead of $400. I don't do that. What I do, and especially the folks that come in and say, I want to appeal, I think the value's too high, and we look at it and, geez, there's a garage that we don't have on the tax roll. So what we do, I tell my appraisers, put that on for next year. You know, if it's omitted property, let's put that on for next year. I never want to punish the taxpayer for coming down and asking us about this. That's just my call. So the this year it's been a really slow appeal year, believe it or not. I ran the numbers just before I came out here, and we have 937 protests.
Wow.
That sounds like a lot.
Not with
Not
as many-
90,000.
Yeah.
But 2 years ago, get this, we had 5,207.
But I think
years
it was because that shock of that 40% increase.
It was, and I think that that's 2 years ago is historic. We had that real estate bubble out of COVID, and we had competing buyers coming from out of state with cash bidding on houses, and this market is a lot more even. The buyers and the sellers no one's in the driver's seat. like last time, it was a seller's market.
Right.
You know, you put a for sale sign and you'd have 12 realtors out in your front yard
Right.
ready to come in. So
Right.
that's not the case now. It's more balanced.
Mm-hmm.
There's less volume. The values have flattened out in most cases in the residential market. They're very flat. I mean, there's some pockets that
Right.
are strong and some that are going down, and that's what we do in the reappraisal is we track new sales.
Uh-huh.
And so, for instance, some neighborhoods went down because the sales actually went down. And I think it's interesting to know that our front range assessors,
Mm-hmm.
almost all of them are showing drops in value.
Hmm.
And we're always 6 months to a year behind.
Behind
Right.
them.
We are.
Yeah.
So this may be coming to a Mesa County
Near you.
near you next year.
Well, and that's what people don't understand is it
No.
can go down.
It can.
It's not going to stay up and stay there.
Mm-hmm.
It can go down
It
as
is.
the market adjusts.
Fluctuates,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is done then every year. Do you send out these cards? Because I don't remember ever having a card like this before,
Okay. So
or I wasn't paying attention, and that is possible.
So we send out notices of value to all the taxpayers every odd year.
Oh, every odd
Every
year.
odd year, we
Mhm.
reappraise the entire county. And then in the even year, we freeze the value unless there's a new addition, a change in use,
Right.
that kind of thing. So when you get your notice, that's a 2-year market change.
Mm.
But if you build that addition, we'll get the permit and change the value in
Okay.
what we call the intervening year. Next May, we'll send out maybe 10,000 notices. So it's about 1/10 of the people that we send out in the odd year.
Mm.
Should people not like my decision, they have due process. They could go to the County Board of Equalization, and that convenes in July
Mm-hmm.
through August 5th. And basically, that's your county commissioners.
Mm-hmm.
In our county, they've appointed referees to do that. There's like 4 or 5 realtors that they've hired to listen to both sides and make a determination. So the way that works in a small county is the commissioners just hear the case.
Right.
Right.
So if you go to Mineral County, they probably don't have a hearing officer that's a professional
Mm-hmm.
realtor, and we're fortunate to have some really good hearing officers that will handle the case. So by the numbers, my office will adjust about half of the protests
Mm-hmm.
and deny about half. And some of those, maybe 10%, go to the county board. And then beyond that, there's an opportunity for due process at district court or the Board of Assessment Appeals, or they can choose binding arbitration.
Hmm.
Hey,
Wow.
we've even had a couple cases in Mesa County go up to the Supreme Court.
Oh my.
No.
I was
Wow.
involved in one of the golf course appeals when this golf course was first being built, and that went up to the Supreme Court.
Hmm.
And I was the appraiser on that. So
Hmm.
it can happen. People have due process, and if they don't agree, then they can exhaust that due process and get the final number from the court.
Oh. And in that case, did they win?
You know, one year they won, and the next year if I remember right, there were 2 years involved, and it was 50-50.
Hmm.
So really, they spent a lot of money for what? Very
Well,
little.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think
That gets expensive taking it up.
it does, and so that's why we don't get any residential properties that go that high,
Mm.
because it's too spendy to hire an attorney to go all the way up.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Except, there's some on the Front Range that have bubbled up to the Supreme Court, and once that case law is established, it basically helps us define how we have to treat other taxpayers. So
So now tell me what month again, that if you said, do you really need, when will we know if the amount of taxes coming in next year? Because I think what people need to know is this is not what you're paying currently for this year. This is for next year. Your appeals and everything.
We're always behind a year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right.
What month was it, if you want to go in and talk to your different districts about their fees that they're getting? And
Sure.
when will we know how much more money they should be taking in based on the increase in property valuations overall, if there's an increase?
That's a great question. So my office certifies values twice a year.
Okay.
In August, right after the county board does their work, we certify those values to all the taxing entities. And what that allows them to do, like for instance, the library will get the value that I have on the Mesa County Library parcels, and they can take the tax amount they want, divide that by my value to get a mill levy that they want to apply, right? Or they can do it just the opposite. They can say, here's the value, it's coming in at 5% more. Maybe I want to adjust my mill levy down 5%. That's the math they do. They do that budget decision making publicly. I think in November, they have budget hearings, all these entities.
Okay.
Very few people show up.
Right. Well, because they don't know. A budget hearing, it's like, I don't even know that I'm invited or could go or could have a voice.
Well, and people think that's kind of dry like hay.
Yes, it is dry like hay.
And so we won't know the assessment rate till November, and we won't know each entity's decision until November. And each entity will send me a letter, my office a letter in December with their mill levy that they've adopted. Okay, they send that to the county commissioners, they send it to me. The commissioners approve all the mill levies. They bang the gavel and approve all the mill levies. But behind the scenes, my office is scouring them. I even made a phone call to one entity that raised their mill levy. I said, show me your Tabor get out of jail free card. And they showed me a resolution that allowed them to raise the mill levy. So nothing gets increased on here without my office is scrutinizing it. I'm a bird dog out there. Everybody says there's no Tabor police. Well, you're looking at them. I will scream bloody murder if anybody tries to put anything on this tax roll without voter approval by a majority of people. That's not happening under my watch. If it does, I want a recall. Because that's my biggest job, is to make sure everybody is only taxed on exactly what the voters want. So next January, all those budget hearings become your tax bill. And then the treasurer collects based on that.
So since you said the library, let's just look at them as an example.
Okay.
So their mill levy is what?
It's 3.005.
Okay. And so say because of valuations, the amount that they'll be receiving increases by 20%.
Okay.
Then what becomes your job? And they just say, oh, well, we'll just keep the mill levy because we're going to get 20% more because the property values have gone up. That, yay for us. We've got more money than we had last time.
Yes.
Is that how that would work? I mean, could I do that?
It would, and I think that I don't have the position or power to tell the library that you must lower your mill levy. I wish I did. I wish I did. And that's their decision on the library board. Or it would be the city council's decision if they got an increase in value from me, whether to keep the mill levy the same and build special projects or refund it or lower the mill levy.
They're not going to do that. They're not going to refund anything. They're going to spend whatever they get. I'm sorry, that's just the way.
Like
Those,
this.
yeah, it's just the way it is. You know,
So the key would be, can a person call you in November and say, and know when these board meetings are scheduled? Would you have knowledge of that or not?
We have a list of all the contacts and websites, and I think it's on our website where you can look for a hyperlink for each taxing entity. For instance, you could look up the Clifton Fire Department and who the fire chief is and the phone number. I want to say that's on my website as a hyperlink. And if it's not, I'll take phone calls and I'll give you some numbers that I have. I do know I have it in my computer, so I'd be happy to share phone numbers for folks that if they would have called and say, who is running the Horizon Drive Business Improvement District, and do you have their phone number? I'll give it to you. If it's not on our website. Assessor.mesacounty.us.
Now, this is something we talked about last time too, is these groups that become a special district. What's the process for that? And can anybody say, no, we don't need a special district for that?
Sure. There's actually one that I heard about that is going to be forming in the Redlands 360 area.
I was wondering about that.
The way those work is if you want to provide a government service, like getting rid of pests in the Redlands, you would have to have enough public support to take that to the commissioners as a service plan, it's called. The service plan is reviewed by the county commissioners, and I think that if it's in the city limits, the city might have a say-so. I'm not a true expert on that, but there's a lot of approval on that. Once there's approval, it can go on a ballot question, and the people that get to vote in that are the people that are encompassed in that
special district.
So there's an opportunity to vote. And here's the interesting thing. The last time there was a vote for a new district was out in Quebec. Okay, and this is 5 years ago? 5-ish years ago. It was to do a mosquito district out there. And there were 2 ballot questions that went on the ballot just for the people in Quebec. The first question was, shall we form a district to eradicate the mosquitoes? And that passed. The second ballot question said, shall we fund 2 mill levies? I think it was about 2 mills. That one went down in flames.
Right.
So people wanted the government service, but they didn't want to pay for it.
Well, fair enough. They thought that it was going to be part of what they paid for already. I think that's one of the questions that you have, because the city just increased, like you've got 360. They just increased the impact fees, and they say that the impact fees are for things like fire protection and increased police support because they need that, and Parks and Rec and roads and
how many other things that they have
right
going, yes.
So are any times you see that they're asking for a special district for something that should already be part of those impact fees for a new subdivision, or is it always just something that wouldn't be provided otherwise? Do they have to prove it? It's not something that's provided through another government entity.
Well, that's a great question. My sense of it is that there's going to be impact fees, and I've been reading about the increase on that. Those aren't under Tabor caps. These mill levies are. So, for instance, the landfill, you pay, I think it's $10 to dump your garbage. That's not under Tabor like these mill levies are. My sense is that governments will try to have tax income coming in from those sources.
Trying to get around Tabor, basically.
You said it, I didn't.
I know.
But
I can't put you in that spot, but I can.
I think some of that goes on, and I'm just your county assessor, and I wish I had some say-so on how much the impact fees would be, but I don't.
Especially in the city, since you're a county.
Right.
Yeah. Well, one thing that you said you wanted to make sure that we covered is if you've had a home more than 10 years and you're over 65, and there's a deadline for applying, because I know that we've had that, and it's a great benefit, and that doesn't necessarily stay on every year. I mean, once you've applied, you're always on it, but they can say, man, we need the money. You have to pay your full amount.
And this is the fun part of my job. So this is a brochure at my office regarding the tax exemptions for veterans and seniors. And for those of us that are either senior citizens or want to become a senior citizen at some future date, this is important to us. So the way it works is the senior property tax exemption for folks that have been in their house for 10 years and are 65 or older, they're eligible to apply with our office, and that knocks off 50% off the first $200,000 in value. And it works out to be close to about $500. I mean, it varies. Out in Quebec, it might be half that. And downtown, there might be some mill levies that are really high, might be more like $750. But on the median, it knocks off about $500. The good news is, once you apply, you never have to reapply with our office. It stays with your house until you move or pass away.
Then you don't care.
Right, and you don't care.
But if you move, and I think that's one of the big rubs that people are seeing, or we're starting to hear complaints about now, is that does stay with the property. It doesn't stay with the people, and that's where.
Well, it doesn't stay with another person that would move in. It's
right.
you.
No. But what I'm trying to say is that people are, saying
they don't get to take that.
They don't get that.
exemption
They think, well, I've been here 10 years, I'm going to sell my property, and then I can move somewhere else, still have that same exemption on this other piece of property. And it doesn't work that way.
Well, let's talk about that. So, that's the way it worked until last year.
What?
Okay.
The legislature just tweaked that, and what they did was for 2 years only, tax years 2025 and 2026, they allowed portability. If you had qualified at a prior residence after January 1st of 2020, then you could take it to your next house.
Wow, that's interesting.
Now, it is interesting because what's going to happen down at my office if they don't renew this for 2027? I'm going to have some very upset seniors.
You are.
Okay, because I do have a question. As you're saying, very upset seniors. So I'm going to give an example. My brother and his wife moved to a new house last year.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd been at their old house before and maybe had that. I don't know if they ever applied for it. But what you're saying is if it doesn't renew, so it's been the 2 years they'd qualify, but then if it didn't renew, they'd go back to their original rate because they hadn't lived in this new home 10 years.
Right. Yeah, the legislation did not extend past 2 years for this portability. So for your brother, if he had qualified at a prior county in Mesa County,
no, he's in this county,
or any other county in Colorado, after January 1st of 20, he can come down to our office and apply for it's called the qualified senior primary residence. It's a little different than the senior exemption because the senior exemption is constitutional,
Right.
and that's set in there. This qualified senior primary residence is just a piece of legislation that they can pull 2 years from now.
Ah,
Now,
okay.
here's the other. It's great, but here's the other knock on it. If you had qualified in November of 19 and moved, you don't get it. I've had some very upset people, rightly so, saying this isn't fair. I wish they would have just said, if you qualified at a prior residence, you can qualify here.
Right.
Would have been simpler and easier to understand for the people, and yeah.
Follow the money, though. I think that they were afraid that it might have taken too much out of the coffers in the state.
Well, and the state is a good state for retirement. We have a lot of retirees here, so yeah.
So I would encourage anybody listening to talk with the legislature and encourage them to make this permanent. And the way they could do that is refer a House continuing resolution to the voters and get this permanent. There was a bill just like that got killed in our legislature. It didn't make it out of committee. It would have put that question to the voters this next fall and allowed the voters to say, can we have portability going forward beyond 2026? That got killed.
Right. Okay.
So that's unfortunate it got killed.
Right.
The a cousin to this program that I am really honored to administer is our veteran exemption. Any veterans out there, first of all, thank you for your service. And if you are 100% service-related disabled or designated unemployable by the VA, I want you to come down and see me before July 1st and apply for the veterans exemption. Different deadline for the senior exemption, that's July 15th. You have to apply by then.
And you have to be 65 by that time.
Right. The veterans, the good thing about that is it doesn't matter what age. You could be a 19-year-old disabled vet. Same thing for what they call a Gold Star spouse. It's a widow of a service member
Didn't know that.
who lost their life in the line of duty, and the widow can come down and apply. Come down by July 1st, and our front people at our front service counter will help you out. There's an online application too if you want to jump online and print it out and get it down to our office.
Now, who wants to do that?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do
Nobody
that.
wants to do
That
that.
doesn't sound fun at all. So
Right.
the other thing that I thought was really interesting that we were talking about before is some of your data can be used by the county commissioner in different ways. And I know one was for the energy industry. And how did the county commissioners just recently use that information that you had gathered just by what you do?
Sure, I have all the numbers for the assessments, and I can actually anybody can actually look online and see the assessments for different parts of town, and I can point to, if someone asks me what was the oil and gas assessment in 2024, I can say it was $140 million. All these brochures are on our website, assessor.mesacounty.us. Click on reports, and you can go back for 100 years and see a trend. And I was able to print out the past 20 years of oil and gas and give that to the commissioners for what they're doing with that lawsuit. So.
And show that there had been a decrease in the number of oil and gas.
Yeah, the number of wells has gone down, and the assessed value has gone down.
Because they're choosing to go somewhere else where it's more favorable to that industry.
Yeah, I think the regulations are different in different parts of the country, for sure. This is a tough basin to drill in because you have altitude and elevation and to get drill rigs in there. It's a little tougher than a flat area. But the regulations are part of the calculus for any oil and gas operator, and they render their production to us, so we know exactly how many MCFs that they pull out of the ground. It's a calculation for million cubic foot of gas. It's an honor system. They render that to us along with the barrels of oil, and we track all that and assess it. Interestingly enough, our legislature has decided to apply a 87.5% assessment rate on oil and gas. Yeah. The House is 7.15%.
Holy moly.
The oil and gas is 87.5%. And
So we're picking winners and losers.
of course, and probably the biggest loser is the coal. That's 100% assessment rate.
Oh my word.
And then on the opposite end of that spectrum, the winner is solar on a residential rooftop. It's not even taxable.
It isn't.
No. You put residential solar up on your house, it's not taxable. The legislature 20 years ago decided they want that to be the darling of the legislature. They want it to be free. So my office doesn't even apply a nickel to any solar.
Because it would increase the value naturally to have solar on your home, and so they're not allowed to look at that as an improvement.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to incentivize the solar,
And for sure.
Of course they are.
You know, if you take and weigh that with the assessment rate I just gave you for oil and gas and for coal, that's not the case. They're not trying to incentivize oil and gas and coal.
No. So anything else? I mean, again, we're just sitting here going, oh, okay. How did you get to be an assessor? I mean, what's your background that would make you want to do this?
Make you want to be in this at all. Yes.
I had a childhood dream.
Being an assessor?
Just kidding.
Yeah.
So I'm an appraiser by trade. I'm a certified general appraiser. I've had my own appraisal business. I started appraising houses in 1987. And from there, that was before appraisal licensing. It was the wild, wild west until
literally.
until 1992. We had licenses for appraisers, and I became a certified residential appraiser in 1992. And a few years later, I gained my certified general appraiser license. I think in 1996-7. Yeah, and that theoretically allows me the competency to appraise anything I see as far as commercial property, vacant land, a golf course I mentioned.
Right.
So that was my trade. When I came to work for the assessor office, I started out as a residential supervisor, then chief appraiser, then deputy assessor. And then when my last assessor was term limited, I said, I want to do this. I really want to do this. And it's a hard job, but it's rewarding. And I have a fantastic staff that's well trained. We have 15 appraisers. We have about 4 cartographers that map out the new subdivisions and customer service people. And I get to work with a fantastic team of experts, and it's been a very rewarding job.
Nice. So anything we haven't asked that you think we need to know?
No, I told you about the deadlines for the exemption. July 1st for vets, July 15th for the seniors. Get your protests into my office by June 9th, and call us at 244-1610 if you have any questions.
Okay.
Very good.
Well, you've been watching Mesa County Compass. This is the facts as we see them, the truth as we know it. You decide.